So here is the problem, I think. Found a cap for a pressure limiter that I could undo with my fingers. So I think a leak has been here, and I think it's been going on since last winter when it was test driven a little, but escalated lately. This is the Valmet 365 harvester head, and this video is a little bit longer. We did search for another solution before we decided to loosen that block on top of the rest of the valve block, replacing some seals on some of the adapters down there that we suspected. That I had replaced a whole lot of hoses, as you have seen if you followed me, that I needed to do something because it was leaking too badly and couldn't really find it, so I tested replacing some of the bad looking hoses, even if I didn't really have any for sure leaky point. Added a little bit of silicone to one more of these. I think the hydraulic oil on them has made the plastic brittle, so the connectors start to crack. It was started after the adapters had new seals on them, still leaking, so sorry for the fussy video. I think I had gotten some hydraulic oil on it and I hadn't cleaned it since the previous video either. Not good enough at least. So brake clean and compressed air, getting things quite clean and dry, and ended up powdering it with wheat flour and just waiting a little. We could see it leaking out from under this block. We were afraid it was in the big block, not that top section, but we could clearly see it coming out at the joint for this top block, so this will cover how to remove it. And it was a bit of a struggle. Had to disconnect a whole lot of things. The small hose had to be removed on each side here, feeding the feed rollers, and the hose connected to this pipe was on there really good. On the other side it was even worse, so we had to resort to a strap and some pipe for leverage, but eventually it started moving here also. And here I would say was the most annoying part. It's 5 bolts in there holding a clamping the pipes to the feed rollers that sits in the belly of the harvester head. So, and there's also I think it's an overflow hose from the feed roller should there be any internal leak in that motor. So with that loosened, this side is a lot harder. It has the saw box there. It's a little bit more open on the other side, but still tricky to gain access. And some of the parts on there, they have these Nordlock washers, so requires a bit of force to undo the bolts. It's also a 12.9 grade probably on there with a lot of torque. And here we are lifting the block off, and this is where I found that leaking cap that I showed in the beginning. Removed one of these seals. I ended up reusing this one. It looked to be in such a good condition, but I replaced a couple of other ones that looked worse. Did some measurements on the O-rings on there and how deep the sealing surface was, and they were a little bit flat. Removed that one I for sure suspected was leaking. Took a little bit of care to not damage it anymore. Siliconed another electric connector, sealing it up. There are a few electric components in there also. Tried putting one of these O-rings from the hose connectors on the harvester head and tried bolting it in place, but it was kind of no resistance even towards the end, so felt it was a little too not enough meat on it, so ended up buying a couple. Now I just got hold of nitrile, where the rest of them are Viton seals in the harvester head, but as I understand it, and I don't think it will experience the kind of heat that it has done in the past, and with an experienced operator and maybe full work in a hot summer day, because this one will be parked most of the times during the summers. And the seals I ended up putting in there are 15 millimeters inner diameter and 2 millimeters the actual seal itself. Some of the seals were quite close in size, so ended up measuring, making sure I put them in the correct place, all of the seals. So they were put on there, and the block was starting to put in place. New Norlock washers and tightening them down. The list is 95 Newton meters for a 12.9 grade. I just had it set at 92, and I'll call it good enough. Here are some of the blue seals that I replaced. These are quite expensive. The O-rings wasn't that much in price. Here I hadn't cleaned well enough, so some time was spent trying to clean things up, and one of the pipes is not loosened at the other end, so I used the ratchet strap and kind of bent it up gently and removed the seal here. But it seems to be kind of an X-ring type of seal, not a real O-ring, and what was listed was O-rings, so I replaced them with O-rings for now. If I have a issue in the future, I will look at obtaining that other kind of seals. The other pipe is easier because it's loose in the other end. And there's an O-ring like in the middle, sealing that transition to the spillover hose. Try to blow out some of the pipes before connecting them. Try to bring in that one, and you kind of have to put them both in place at the same time to be able to get the clamp in place. I make a mistake here that I'll cover in a little bit, so if you follow this as a tutorial, do not tighten that pipe in place. Do not tighten these down until you've watched the entire video. Here I had issues. I couldn't get the socket on there when it was far down, so I ended up reverting to a Allen head on the bolt in here. That worked better. And also I tightened the pipe going out to the articulating feed roller. That turned out to be a mistake. So what was a little depressed, so because the pipe above it should be below it, so I ended up backtracking a little, and it was possible to force that other pipe that's still loose down by the motor. So and I was able to get that in place before calling it a day. So here I'm having a break. Now I'm back, and then I started cleaning up around the other motor. Same procedure here, bending up the pipe slightly and removing the old seal and using a spatula small spatula to put the new o-ring in place, ensuring I don't forget that third o-ring in there. Also here very little room, and having a little pair of pliers to help get the bolt down. And eventually I think these two motors were the hardest part about this, getting them the clamps on them undone. I think in the earlier version they had like an S-type clamp. Here I think the clamp is on the pipe to start with, or maybe the other end of the pipe can be fed through that clamp. I'm not sure, I didn't get that far. Here I had made a mistake, because this pipe I had to loosen again because it was pushing down on the other pipe, and then it couldn't be removed, the cloth I had there. So I will have to loosen it again. So there are a few mistakes made. It can't come on up, so I had to loosen it a little to be allowed to pry up the other pipe once it was tightened down by the motor. We also folded one of the hoses a little away, and that pipe needed to be kind of pulled a little to go down into its slot, so we had a strap around it and a pry bar to push that down. I can update now. Also, this was yesterday, and I've been out with the machine a couple of hours today, and it seems to be no leaks to be noticed. It will be interesting to see when it's been parked. I couldn't see any leaks when it's been used earlier also, unless it was parked and there was a little puddle under it the next day. I suspect that was because of that cap was leaking a tiny bit. It can't really come undone very far because of the block being above it, but eventually it probably damaged the seal enough. All the hoses were put in place, and it's ready to start the next day today. So I deserve a beer now, right?